Ella's life had once been everything she had dreamt of. She married the love of her life, David, at the age of 24, and together they built a humble but happy life. David was a hard-working and loving man, and Ella thought that their future was set. The arrival of their daughter, Nina, brought even more joy into their lives. Ella could still remember the day David's eyes lit up the first time he held Nina in his arms, promising to always protect their little family. But life, as Ella would come to realize, was unpredictable and often cruel. When Nina was just 2 years old, David was involved in a tragic car accident and he did not survive. The shock of his sudden death left Ella devastated. Her world crumbled beneath her, and the reality of raising a child alone loomed over her like a dark cloud. She had lost not just her husband, but her best friend, her confidant, and the father of her child. But despite the pain, Ella knew that she had to be strong. She had to pull herself together, not for herself, but for Nina. Ella took on the role of both mother and father, pouring all her love and energy into raising Nina. She returned to work as a nurse, picking up extra shifts to make ends meet. The struggle was real, but Ella persevered. She was strengthened by the presence of her daughter Nina, who was the only person that reminded her of the love she and David had once shared. By the time Nina turned 8, Ella had built a life for the two of them. It wasn't easy, but they had each other, and that was enough, until one day, when everything changed. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when Ella's life took an unexpected turn. Kemi, her best friend, had invited her to a wedding. At first, Ella refused. She did not feel like socializing, and weddings reminded her of what she had lost. But Kemi was persistent. "Ella, you need this. You have been burying yourself in work for too long. It is time you get out, meet people, and maybe even, who knows, start loving again." Ella agreed reluctantly. She wore a simple red dress that she hadn't worn in years and allowed Kemi to drag her out of the house. The wedding was beautiful and Ella had a lot of fun, but not just fun, because that was where she met Daniel. Daniel was charming, with a warm smile and a confidence that immediately drew Ella in. He introduced himself as a businessman and spoke with the ease of someone used to social situations. What caught Ella off guard wasn't just his charm, it was how genuinely interested he seemed in her. He did not just make small talk, he was genuinely interested in knowing her. There was no awkwardness, no pity in his eyes, just interest and respect. By the end of the evening, Daniel asked for her number. Ella hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready to open her heart again. But something about Daniel's sincerity made her hand him her phone. Weeks passed, and Daniel became really close to Ella. He would text her sweet messages in the morning, send flowers to the hospital where she worked, and took her out to dinners while Nina stayed with Kemi. He seemed perfect, like a man who genuinely cared for her and was eager to be a part of her life. And it wasn't long before he wanted to meet Nina. Nina had always been a perceptive child. She adored her mother and was protective of her in ways a child shouldn't have to be. When she met Daniel, she was excited. She liked the idea of her mother being happy again. But as time went on, something began to bother her. It was nothing obvious at first. Daniel was always kind to Nina, bringing her small gifts and including her in outings with her mother. But Nina noticed how Daniel avoided talking about his own family. Whenever she asked about them, he would change the subject or give vague answers. One evening, Daniel visited them, and while Ella was preparing dinner, Nina overheard Daniel on the phone. He was in the living room, but his voice was really low and serious. Nina quietly crept closer, staying out of sight. She couldn't hear every word, but what she did catch sent a chill down her spine. She doesn't need to know. Just keep everything quiet until after the wedding, Daniel said in a low tone. Nina's heart skipped a beat. What didn't her mother need to know? And why was Daniel talking about a wedding? Nina brushed it aside, but she became more suspicious when 1 month later, Daniel proposed to her mother. It happened on a Saturday evening, just after a family picnic. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the park where they sat. Daniel had been quiet throughout the day, more reserved than usual, but Ella had not thought much of it. Then, as they were packing up to leave, Daniel turned to Ella, took her hands in his, and dropped to one knee. Ella gasped and her eyes widened with surprise as Daniel pulled out a small velvet box. Ella, I know we haven't known each other for very long, but I can't imagine my life without you and Nina. I want to be there for both of you, for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me? Ella's breath caught in her throat. She had not expected this, not so soon. But as she looked into Daniel's eyes, all she saw was sincerity. She glanced at Nina, who was watching quietly from the side. She had her doubts, but Ella's heart, which had been locked away for so long, urged her to say yes. She nodded. Yes, I'll marry you. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time in years, Ella felt a fresh hope for the future. But Nina, who was standing at the corner, felt only a deep sense of dread. The following day, Nina couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She knew her mother was happy and she didn't want to ruin it. But she also knew that she could not ignore the strange things she had been noticing. While Daniel was at the house one evening, Nina asked if she could play a game on his phone, and he handed it over to her without hesitation. But Nina had other plans. She quickly scrolled through his gallery, looking for anything unusual. That was when she found it, a hidden folder filled with pictures of Daniel with a woman she did not recognize. The photos were intimate and they were recent. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the images. But what shocked her even more was a picture of Daniel with a man who looked familiar. She couldn't place him at first, but then it clicked. Uncle Jude. Uncle Jude was her late father's brother, a man who had vanished from their lives. After David's death, he had been involved in shady dealings, and Ella had cut off all ties with him to protect Nina. But what was Daniel doing with him? Nina's heart pounded as she put the phone back down. Her mind was spinning with questions. She had to tell her mother, but how could she do it without breaking her heart? After days of trying to keep calm, Nina couldn't keep the secret any longer. During dinner the next evening, she blurted out, "Mom, Uncle Daniel is not who he says he is." Ella looked at her daughter in confusion. "What do you mean, Nina?" Nina hesitated for a moment. She then took a deep breath. "I saw pictures on his phone. He's with another woman, and there is a man too, Uncle Jude." Ella froze in shock. What? What are you talking about?" Nina's heart pounded in her chest. "I am telling you the truth, Mom. I heard him on the phone too. He's hiding something. I don't think we can trust him." Ella was still in shock, but she knew that she had to confront Daniel. She asked him to meet up with her at an open restaurant the next day for lunch. After they ate, Ella asked straight up, "Do you know Jude, my brother-in-law?" Daniel, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly looked tensed. He opened his mouth to speak, but Ella cut him off. "Don't lie to me, Daniel. If you know Jude, I need to know the truth." Daniel sighed sadly. "Ella, listen, it is complicated. Yes, I know Jude. We were involved in some business a long time ago, but that is all." Ella's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of business?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably on his seat. "It doesn't matter anymore. That is in the past. I love you, Ella. Let us concentrate on our future." But Ella was not convinced. She had spent too many years protecting herself and Nina from the dangers of her past. She couldn't ignore the warning signs. Not now. After that lunch, Ella couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She confronted Daniel again, demanding the full truth. She got the police involved this time around for protection, And that was when Daniel finally admitted that he had known Jude and her late husband, David. They had been involved in a risky business years ago, a deal that had gone horribly wrong just before David's tragic death. Jude had disappeared after David's death, fearing for his life and leaving Ella to pick up the pieces. Daniel came in, not out of loyalty, but because he saw an opportunity. He hadn't come into Ella's life by accident. He had sought her out, knowing about the money Daniel had left behind for her and Nina, which Ella had no idea about. Daniel's plan had been to win Ella's trust, marry her, and then gain access to that money. Ella's world shattered in an instant. The man she had allowed into her heart, the man she had trusted to take care of her and Nina, had been deceiving her from the beginning. Her hands trembled as the weight of the truth settled in. You were using me? Daniel's face softened and he pleaded. It wasn't like that, Ella. Yes, it started that way, but then I fell in love with you. I swear I love you. I love Nina too. Ella shook her head. How could you do this to us? To me, after everything I have been through? Nina, who had been standing silently, couldn't take it anymore. She rushed forward, grabbing her mother's hands. Mom, we don't need him. We'll be fine without him, just like we have always been. Ella looked down at her daughter, the one person in the world she could always trust, and a tear slipped down from her cheek. Nina had been right all along. She had seen the truth that Ella had been too blinded by love to see. Without another word, Ella turned to Daniel. Leave now. I won't be pressing charges against you. But don't ever show up in front of my daughter and I again. Get out, Ella thundered. Realizing that there was no way to salvage the situation, Daniel finally left. He grabbed his coat and left without another word. After Daniel's departure, Ella was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered heart once again. The thought of what Daniel had almost done to their family made Ella's heart broke the more. For days, she couldn't bring herself to talk about it. She went through the schedule of everyday life, dropping Nina off at school, working for long hours at the hospital, and coming home to the same quiet house. But something had changed. She had lost faith in the idea of love. She had opened her heart once, and it had been ripped apart. Opening it a second time had led to nothing but more pain. It was Nina who finally broke the silence. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Nina quietly asked, "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" Ella looked at her daughter, who had grown so much in the past few months. Nina was no longer the innocent child she had once been. She had seen the worst of the adult world and had been forced to grow up too soon. "Yes, we are going to be okay," Ella said softly. "We have always been okay, haven't we?" Nina nodded. "I don't need anyone else, just you, Mom." Ella smiled weakly. "Me too, sweetheart, just you and me. Your father left a huge sum of money for you, so you don't have to worry about your future anymore. We'll be fine." Ella knew that life had to go on, and she was determined to make sure that they would not only survive, but thrive. Moving on, Ella occupied herself in her work. She began taking extra shifts at the hospital and spending her free time solely with Nina. She also enrolled Nina in an extracurricular arts class, something Nina had always wanted to do. The community at the hospital where she worked became her second family. Her colleagues, who had watched her struggle over the years, offered her support and kindness. Slowly, Ella began to heal. She realized she did not need a man to complete her. She had her daughter, her career, and her inner strength, and that was enough. Just when Ella thought life was beginning to settle down, a letter arrived one morning. It was postmarked from a town far away, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. Ella hesitated before opening it. The letter was from a woman named Clara, whom Ella had never met. Clara wrote that she had heard about Ella's cancelled wedding to Daniel through mutual acquaintances. She went on to explain that she had once been engaged to Daniel as well, and just like Ella, she had been deceived. Clara's story was hauntingly familiar. Daniel had charmed his way into her life, made promises of a future together, and then disappeared with a huge sum of money he stole from her. Clara had been left heartbroken and betrayed, much like Ella. But the letter did not end there. Clara revealed that Daniel had a pattern. He had done this to several women over the years, using them for financial gain and then disappearing. He was a con artist, and Ella had narrowly escaped becoming his latest victim. Ella's hand shook as she read the letter. It was a chilling reminder of how close she had come to losing everything. She realized that if it hadn't been for Nina's suspicions, she might have fallen even deeper into Daniel's webs of lies. But Clara wasn't just writing to share her story. She wanted to help. Clara had spent years tracking Daniel's movements, trying to bring him to justice, and she was reaching out to Ella in the hopes that they could work together to stop him. Ella did not hesitate. She reached out to Clara immediately, and the two women began to exchange information. Together, they gathered evidence, Clara's testimony and Ella's experience, and the documents Nina had discovered when snooping through Daniel's phone. With Uncle Jude's knowledge of the past dealings, they built a solid case. They filed a report with the authorities, determined to bring Daniel to justice. The process was long and emotionally taxing, forcing Ella to relive the painful memories of her relationship with Daniel. But Ella knew that she couldn't let this man continue to hurt other women. Months passed, and finally, after extensive investigations, Daniel was tracked down and arrested. The news spread quickly, and more women came forward with their own stories of betrayal at Daniel's hands. The courtroom was filled with testimonies, and the series of lies Daniel had cooked over the years was finally unraveled. Daniel was sentenced to prison for fraud and other crimes, and his days of deceit came to an end. For Ella, it was a bittersweet victory. Justice had been served, but the scars of his betrayal would take time to heal. With Daniel behind bars, Ella could finally begin to move on. The weight of the past had been lifted, and now she felt free. Ella focused on her career, becoming a leader at the hospital and a role model for her colleagues. Nina too thrived in school, full of the confidence and strength that Ella had instilled in her. They had both come out of this ordeal stronger than before. Although Ella had sworn off love for a time, she eventually met someone new, a kind gentleman named Ade. He was different from Daniel in every way. Ade was patient, understanding, and respected the boundaries Ella had put in place after everything she had been through. Ella took her time, getting to know him slowly and opening her heart again. She was cautious, but with Ade, she did not feel the need to rush. Years later, Ade proposed to Ella one evening as they had dinner. It was a simple and intimate moment, filled with love and respect. This time, Ella said yes without hesitation. She knew in her heart that this was real, that this was the love she had been waiting for all along. Nina stood proudly beside her mother at the small wedding ceremony. As Ella and Ade exchanged vows, Nina smiled, knowing that her mother had finally found her happy ending. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed the story, kindly share your thoughts about it in the comment section and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel for more stories. Thank you and remain blessed.